Well, when you analyze the events that happened at the border between Uganda and South Sudan, there are a few issues that are facts. And one of that is that there was exchange of fire between the UPDF and the South Sudanese Defense Forces. Another fact is that lives were lost. 6 South Sudanese Defense Forces troops lost their lives in that exchange of fire, and 1 Uganda Defense Forces troop also lost his life in that exchange of fire. Well, there are issues that are still under contention, and both of these countries have their own versions of the story of who exactly was in the wrong in this particular event. Because the South Sudanese Defense Forces are saying that it is Uganda that was in our territory, and the Uganda Defense Forces is saying that it is South Sudan that was in our territory. Well, in this video, I've gone back in time to analyze the issues that have been happening in this border, as well as the answer as to who exactly has been moving the border time and time again between Uganda and South Sudan. Well, this is Bonafide. If you haven't subscribed, kindly subscribe and hit that notification button so that when I release something new on the South Sudan-Uganda clash, you get notified as soon as possible. Well, both South Sudan and Uganda are in agreement on something, the exact point where these clashes happened. But both have different stories to tell of what exactly happened, because one side say that you were on our side of the border, while the other say that you attacked us on our side of the border. Well, these borders are not different from other borders in Africa. These are colonial borders that have now been recognized to be countries or international borders. These are borders that were set by the colonial authorities, and the colonial authority that managed South Sudan and Uganda are the British. Well, the British did not care about ethnic communities that lived in these particular places. They drew the lines of the border just for administrative purposes. They thought more of themselves than the Africans, and these borders have led to various clashes in different parts of Africa. Well, the British often used straight lines on maps, rivers or mountain ridges that were easy for surveyors to plot rather than factoring in trade routes or cultural ties. Well, while these colonial boundaries are recognized internationally, on the ground, the reality is characterized by loosely defined areas, and particularly in Kajokeji, Moyo, Yumbe, and Nimule, with overlapping ethnic communities and informal administration. Well, the current administrations in Uganda and South Sudan have seen this problem. This is not something that started just a week ago when there was that clash between the SSPDF and the UPDF. This is a matter that has been in contention for about a decade, and both of these countries have been engaging on how to solve the situation in northern Uganda and southern South Sudan. There have been various efforts that have been made to resolve this. For example, in 2009, President Museveni and President Salva Kiir agreed that no development will proceed in certain contested areas until borders were formally demarcated, meaning that no authority will go into a particular area to install its own services or its own structures until there has been a physical demarcation of the lines where Uganda ends and where South Sudan starts. Also, in 2017, there was a blueprint that was agreed in Addis Ababa with Africa Union to delimit and demarcate the boundary. These are efforts that were being taken by both South Sudan and Uganda to ensure that there has been no conflict in the border between these two countries. And that is not all, because in 2023 to 2024, there was the formation of a joint border management pact and committee. And the demarcation was scheduled to begin in 2027, and both communities were urged not to shift boundaries. So there has been no shift of boundary formally by any country, either South Sudan or Uganda. There has been no formal announcement that Uganda is going to increase its border or South Sudan is going to increase its border. This has not happened. But what exactly has happened is that the communities living in these areas have also been pushing for the services of these different countries to enter into regions that previously, as I said, in 2009, there are regions that were not supposed to have development by either South Sudan or Uganda because they were in contention. Now, what has been happening is not a formal declaration of either South Sudan or Uganda. It has been the local encroachment, for example, setting up local administration or renaming places. For example, in the past disputes, Uganda structures were reportedly installed in parts of Kajukeji, prompting backlash and protests. And there have been also instances where South Sudan has also brought their influence in areas that were not supposed to have any development by either South Sudan or Uganda. Therefore, these services or the service provision by either country to go into these disputed areas is now what has been causing flare-ups in either Kajukeji or in Yombe district, in the areas that have been hotspots for clashes in this border region. And it seems as time goes, as population also increases near the border, there is a much complex issue now to solve between these two countries, because more people are living now in these areas. More people from South Sudan have been moving towards Uganda. More people from Uganda have been moving also towards South Sudan. Mind you, these are communities that are related. They are intertwined, meaning that there are people who have families across the border and casually moves to their relatives across the border. These are people who are used to live together. And when this international line will be now demarcated, of course, there is going to be a huge gap between these families and friends that have been living at the border. Also, there are local political leaders either in South Sudan or Uganda that have been fueling this one-sided agenda, and this has been causing animosity between each other. As I said in a previous video, people have bought land in these contested areas. There are Ugandans who have bought land deep into South Sudan, and there are South Sudanese people who have bought land deep into Uganda. And therefore, when this rivalry comes, there are people who are disadvantaged on these border regions. Well, I will keep updating you the latest of what is happening at the border between Uganda and South Sudan, even as General Muhoozi will be heading to Juba to meet President Salva Kiir to discuss about these matters. Keep it bona fide.